Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam, and today we're cutting through the noise. We're going to get to the truth in the news, look at the data, and I'm going to give you some of my observations and where I believe that you can find some opportunity. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our very first story. And this first story is going to come, like I said, from Risk Media. And it's basically talking about the AI evolution. Will it kill the CRM, right? The contact resource management software that we have. Is it going to actually do anything, and is AI going to just disrupt our CRM systems, right? So that's kind of the concept behind this article, right? So Risk Media is asking if AI will replace or at the very least diminish the role of real estate CRMs. And what does that kind of look like? Now, the headline is going to lean pretty into the heavy AI takeover type, conversation. The real story is about how your database is becoming a living, breathing assistant, rather than just this digital filing cabinet. Like if you follow the historical narrative of like keeping track of contacts, you go from like the old days, like the Rolodex, the flip through and you have a little piece of paper and it's got all the information on it and you write everything going on. That's basically what a CRM is today, right? It's the old Rolodex. You go from the Rolodex to like the Palm Pilot. Anybody remember the Palm Pilot days where you had this little thing with all these little numbers and letters and stuff, you type it all in. Then you went to the digital smartphones and the CRMs, all that kind of stuff came into our era. And that's where we're at now. Now, the next evolution of CRMs is really more about AI. It's like, how is AI coming alongside these CRMs and being integrated into them, where now it's becoming a great assistant rather than just a filing cabinet for contacts and stuff like that. So that's what this article is going to be talking about. So let's go ahead and get into this article now. Let's talk about this. Again, the title of this is, Will AI Replace or Diminish Real Estate CRMs? It says, real estate agents should stop following decades of coaching advice to treat your business like a business and instead start using their CRM to support a professional practice. Now, look, it's a quote, right? Treat your business like a business. That's fine. All that kind of stuff's good, but you still should be thinking like a business owner. And it's like the CRM is like a support system. That's what it's there for. It's to support your business. But then what is it exactly now? And this is where this article is going to be leaning into that. What does this CRM actually mean? How does it correlate to the way you operate your business now with AI? So this is a commentary by Alan Dalton. And again, Risk Media. All the links to the articles that I kind of go over on this live stream are in the description on the YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out if you want to go back and read these for yourself. Encourage you to do so, because I just kind of skim through it and briefly kind of go over it and just give you my opinions. But anyway, it begins with this. It must be difficult for consumers to reconcile what they hear when agents proclaim, I stay in touch, with the reality that if a do not contact registry existed for homeowners, many would sign up without hesitation. Do not contact, yes, true. CRMs have undeniably been instrumental in helping real estate agents not only stay in touch, but keep what are too often called past clients informed. The challenge comes when consumers across all industries realize that they can now retrieve virtually every concealed fact, data point, and piece of market intelligence about real estate in minutes. All right, and unlike what agents send them, this information can be deeply personalized and completely free of prospecting motives. So let's just pause for just a second. There's a lot that was just kind of stated inside of that one paragraph. If we go back just a few years ago, your CRM would be where you set up a drip campaign and it would just automatically put out all the information that the consumer needed to see, right? They would know housing information, they would know what's going on, and it was kind of like your way to stay in touch. And the argument in that paragraph is basically what they're saying is that the clients now are highly informed. They are very much aware of what is going on in the market. If you look at all the online big portals like Zillow, Realtor.com, and all of them, they have access to more data than they ever have. So it's not so much a data point entry is what your CRM is. It's more of a piece of intelligent software that helps keep you in front of your clients and delivering value back to them. So the value has kind of shifted. So let's get back into this whole concept. Real estate is not alone in needing to grapple with this shift, though it is particularly difficult in an industry that has always been more tactical than strategic. One need only look at what happened recently in the stock market. When Anthropic announced advances in its AI platform, the market's rattled, and software and CRM developers like Salesforce, Intuit, and Adobe suffered notable, if momentarily, drops in value on news that AI could outperform their existing platforms. So there's a little bit of a massive move in the technology arena when it comes to AI. A lot of these companies are really struggling to implement a lot of this kind of AI. To be honest, if you just go back 4 or 5 years ago, AI was just getting started. If you look at it where we are now, it's integrated in almost every little facet of technology. And it's going so fast that the companies that program and develop these things are having a hard time keeping up with that. And then you couple that with an economy that's constantly changing. This is a very difficult endeavor to get into. All right, it says real estate CRMs are especially vulnerable, and in turn, are most professional and tech-savvy agents, though smart enough to automate ongoing engagement with the clients and households they seek to inform, persuade, and retain over the 10+ years those clients are typically out of the market. Must pay close attention to what comes next. All right, now we get into the meat of this article. There's the introduction. We kind of understand, they set the stage on what's happening here, major shift with technology, AI being, implemented into the CRM. What is the future of the real estate agent in regards to their CRM? So that's the setting the stage here. So now what does the next type statement say? It says AI will not replace agents. It will divide them. So let's just pause for a second, right? AI will not replace agents. It will divide them. Agents who lean predominantly on generative AI will be most vulnerable. Okay, generative AI. As consumers grow more proficient at performing the same tasks, market analysis, property write-ups, staging ideas, open house strategies, negotiation frameworks, the generative agent's value proposition erodes quickly. So what do you think? Pause and ponder that for just a second. What do you think generative AI means, right? So if I was to give you a scenario about that, it's the same thing as if I was to go on there right now and say, hey, AI, Gemini, ChatGPT, or whoever, create for me a YouTube channel giving me this script, right? That's a generative response. I'm asking AI to come and generate something for me that I can then use. All right, the same kind of concept would be like if I'm a consumer and I'm looking for houses. I could simply say, hey, AI, generate for me a best marketing plan for my house so I can market it for myself, right? It could generate that AI. Let's say you want to be for sale by owner and you're an owner and you say, hey, generate for me, and you give them the criteria of your house and give me a listing and a description, right? That's generative AI. So those days, that's nothing new. Agents out there use it all the time for that kind of generative type of AI. All right, so that's fine, and that's the very subsurface use of AI in the real estate industry. But the argument is that everybody can do that. That's not differentiating you in the market whatsoever. That's what even the consumer can do. They can do generative AI, all right? So let's go on here, and we'll get to the point of what he's trying to make. It says agents who leverage analytic AI, however, will become increasingly valuable. They will bring AI into client consultation. Excuse me. Let's see. Sorry. They will bring AI into client consultations and discover that the highest and best use of AI is a thought partner. The dynamic becomes clear. AI advises. Real estate consultants consult. Clients decide in collaboration with someone who truly knows them. This distinction matters because advisors don't sell and market real estate, consultants do. Now, we got to unpack this for just a second here, because if we just quickly read that, we don't really absorb exactly what it's trying to tell us, all right? So if I go to generative AI and I think of AI as a way to advise me and give me deeper thought and deeper processes, and I ask it questions and it helps me to bring all that together, knowing what I know about my client and what their needs and wants are, gives me the information that I can assimilate into the knowledge that I have in my experience to be able to consult and guide my client, right? Ultimately helping my client to then decide what is best for them. So they can go on and use generative AI to get advice. The problem with the consumer is they don't have the knowledge and experience in relation to what their needs are to marry the two, because then it just becomes a whole lot of noise. They get a lot of noise and they can't navigate that. So what do they need? They need a consultant. Somebody's going to come alongside them, marry all of that information and all of that data and bring it together to help them navigate to be able to make a decision. See how that works? AI advises, real estate consultants consult, clients decide. That's the window. That's how you're going to use generative AI to lead the client along to help them make an informed decision. The consultant is where the real estate agent comes in. Now we get to the whole conversation about CRMs. Where does CRM fit when consumers can get the information themselves? Where do we put our contact resource management software at? All right. When homeowners can access precise, objective answers to their real estate questions without being tethered to a commissioned salesperson, the question becomes urgent. What role does a CRM play? What role does that CRM play? Right? If your consumer and your client can get all the information that they want by just going online and asking AI and asking Google and all this kind of stuff, gather all that information, then what does our CRM do? Because we used to use our CRMs to track every bit of information about our clients and what's going on in the market. We used to have it's tied to the MLS, all this kind of stuff, right? It says real estate CRMs must evolve beyond simply mirroring the language of the real estate industry. Specifically, they need to begin performing on words like client base rather than database. They need to build content architecture around the idea that real estate agents should stop following decades of coaching advice to treat your business like a business and instead start using their CRM to support a professional practice. So, and I talked about this, a couple days ago, is like, every business has a system in place. Like if you were to be an accountant, you're going to have a certain type of software you use as your hub. If you're going to be an attorney, you have a certain type of software you use for your hub. Medical practices have different types of software they use as their hub. So the argument here is that the CRM is where the real estate agent centers their business. So it's not just a database anymore. It's not just somewhere where you just dump a bunch of information. It's part of it. But what the database or the CRM is specifically doing is helping you to develop a professional practice, something that brings all of that together with AI being the assistant and built into the system to help you build all around the CRM. So it's not just where you dump information. It's not just where you store information anymore. And that's where this industry is heading as far as the CRM goes. It is going more and more into the direction as being that central hub for your professional practice, your professional business, right? All right. Is this a distinction without a difference? Anything but. Businesses have customers, practices have clients. That's a good point. Okay, I see where they're going with this. So businesses have customers, practices have clients. So if you think about, a medical practice, right? What do they have? Well, they have clients, they have patients, right? They have people that have bought in and they use and they come back often, and that's a client. A customer is just a one-off. You sell them something and they're gone, right? This distinction, coupled with software that reflects a higher professional purpose, will lead agents toward more consultative, genuinely relational client experiences. Ones that transcend data and information that consumers can now access without them. I talked about this yesterday. The customer experience, the CQ or CX. The CX is actually a big thing that you're looking for a client experience. Like a client will come back when they have a good experience. That's how it works. If you can think about any national franchise out there that has grown exponentially throughout the years and has become a multi-franchised business industry, just think Chick-fil-A or anything like that, right? They have a client experience. They have an experience for their customers that brings them back over and over again. So your CRM, the argument here is that it's a client experience. The whole system itself is working to create a consistent experience for the client where they know what to expect, they know how to integrate, they know what the technology is, they know what the information is, they know what value you provide. So it's marrying all of that together. All right. Where should AI, CRMs, and real estate consultants converge? The greatest opportunity for real estate agents to earn more by helping more clients lies in an astonishingly undeserved dimension of the profession. All right, so let's go ahead through this. There are 3 areas of real estate value: transactional, real estate planning, and home asset management. The first has been nearly perfected. The other 2 are largely avoided or outright ignored. So Transactional, you know, as agents, we go through all kinds of training where we talk about how to represent clients, how to get them from point A to point Z, and the whole buying transactional process. We have TCs, transaction coordinators, that help us through that process. That's the transactional thing. There's been a lot of time spent on developing those systems. You definitely need to have a professional system in place for the transaction. There's no way around that. Like, if you want to have a good customer experience, the transactional experience has to be very consistent. Like, it can't be, you know, just random. It needs to be very consistent. So that way people will be more apt to give you referrals. That's the process. So that's layer one. And the argument here is that the next two are the more undeserved or less people are paying attention to these two other systems, the real estate planning process and the home asset management. All right, so that's where we're going to get into this article. We're going to be talking about those two. All right, so real estate planning and home asset management represent decisions that require consultation and collaboration, not just information. All right, so if you think about it, real estate planning, I'm not just going on and trying to get information and delivering that to my client. I'm not just going out there and saying, here's the information for you to make a decision, right? That's not what it is. I am helping them navigate the planning of their real estate. I'm going through the nuances of their needs or wants or emotions, and I'm helping to navigate that, consulting them along the journey, right? And that's where we are shifting from that transactional side into more of that real estate planning. Same thing goes with like the home asset management. When you start talking about that, that's all about helping them to be able to manage the home, to get it ready to be sold and transferred of ownership and all that kind of stuff. There's things that AI cannot do, and that's where our focus needs to be shifting towards, right? All right, real estate planning and home asset management represents decisions that require consultation, collaboration, not just information. That information will increasingly come from AI, but the judgment, the deeply personal, context-specific, financially consequential judgment still requires a human being in the room. So if you start talking about your value proposition, those categories right there is where AI can't replace you, right? AI doesn't have judgment on the circumstances. It can't read the room, right? It can't be deeply personal. It can't understand, who these people are and their families and what they're going through, life changes. It can't do that. It also cannot be completely understanding of the financial makeup of the clients you're working with. Sure, they can go in there and put all kinds of different scenarios in, but it's going to be limited in the focus. And typically what's going to end up happening is going to be information overload. Every single time they go and use the generative AI, put in a prompt to get more information, they're going to get a different kind of structure of that. So it could be an endless pool of information that they still don't really know what to do with that, right? So that's where the consultation comes in. And that's the next argument. This in-home consultation model will skyrocket brokers' market share because that business flows from agents' sphere of influence. It will exponentially increase agent incomes. And when CRMs become an extension of the personalized real estate planning relationship, one advised by AI, anchored by a trusted consultant, and centered on the client, everyone wins. That's good. That's really good, right? One advised by AI. Okay, we got some advice from AI, right? AI has access. If you think about it, like just ponder that. AI, use Gemini as an example, owned by Google, has access to information all around the world. Every type of information is available to it. All right, so if it's advised by AI, using your logic, your reasoning, your wisdom, anchored by a trusted consultant, you, the real estate agent, right? You're the consultant, taking all that information, bringing it to some kind of conclusion, all right? And then what's the next part that it says here? I lost my place. Where'd it go? Financially consequential judgment. All right, so that financial part as well is like it can't take all that information, understanding the context of the personal needs and bring the financial conclusion. It can't do that. So that's a great observation. All right, it's all centered on the client. Real estate consultants earn more and matter more. Homeowners receive genuine guidance on what is, for most of them, their largest asset. CRMs find their true purpose not as prospecting machines, but as the infrastructure of lasting professional relationships. And again, notice the word infrastructure. Infrastructure is a key word there because it is a hub, right? It's integrating all of the things, AI, database, all of those things into one platform so you as a real estate agent can build that client experience. That's what it's there for. AI becomes the advisor behind the advisor. right? Again, everybody can do generative AI. I can go in there and enter any prompt I want and get information. But what do I do with the information? That's the consultant. And real estate and real estate, an industry at risk of being flattened into commodity, becomes more human than ever. That's the whole argument here. And I would agree with this article. I think it's a well written. Alan Dalton, he says he's the former CEO of Realtor.com and past president of Move Inc. Real Estate Division. He also served as Senior Vice President of Research and Development for Home Services of America and is the author of the recent book on artificial intelligence, Agent to Agent. So there you go. He's got some experience in this field. He's talking about AI. He's written a book about it. He's done some research. So let's heed some of this advice. I think this is where the industry is going as far as AI is going. You know, AI is beginning to shift into our CRMs. It's very fast and rapidly. They are becoming more like action engines, right? More of like predicting what client needs are, integrated by my consultant, understanding that I know real estate and bring the two together. But the human element still remains, and let's put it in a scenario of it's like a moat, right? AI might be the castle that holds all the information, but the moat protects that information and then protects it and gives it out correctly, right? AI can draft the email, but it can't build the trust required for a closing. It can't do that, all right? So some action items I would give you outside of this article here, just to kind of work. We're going to focus on CRM. What I would say is this. I would go through your CRM and maybe even just your whole transactional process and your experience and your consultations and your meetings and stuff you have with clients, you know, and I would just go through there and identify repetitive tasks. Are there certain things that you're doing yourself repeatedly? You know, is it certain follow-ups, certain birthdays, certain anniversaries, right? Is there something inside of your system that AI could help with? There's a lot of research out there, a lot of programs out there that help automate a lot of these type of things and still make it very personal. So I would do that. I would clean your data up a little bit. You know, that if your CRM is being integrated with AI or it's not there yet, but it's getting ready to be, I would spend at least 30 minutes every day for a little while going through and filling in the information in that CRM of any missing information you have. You know, there's a lot of times we don't have birthdays, anniversaries, and those type of details. We don't know what their pets' names are, their kids' names are. You understand that your CRM is only going to be as good as the information that it has. And then when AI is instigated into your CRM, if it's not already, it's only going to be as good as the information that it has access to. So if you want more of this automated and more of these personal touches, it needs the information. So if you really want to have a good database, and let me tell you, the top agents that are going to make it long-term in these big shifts with AI is going to have a database full of information. And they're going to be able to be very streamlined in their processes. There is a generation coming in the real estate industry that is going to really move at a very fast pace. And those that are not instigating these type of systems, to be honest, are going to be falling behind. It's going to get very, very, very fast marketing with the AI and CRMs. I truly think so. So start spending some time now getting your CRM up and running with information. So as AI is integrated, it has what it needs to be able to help you in your business and become that central hub, right? That's what I would do. And I would get really good. I would go back into my CRM too, and I would look at trying to make sure my tags, you know, are correct. You know, like if there's, you know, current buyers I'm working with, past buyers, you know, maybe it's likely to move, you know, cold, warm, hot. Like make sure they're all categorized correctly. You know, it's really hard to use a CRM if you don't have everything categorized correctly. It just becomes a mess. You don't know where to begin. You get in there, you want to do some prospecting, but since you don't have the proper tags in place to be able to pull the information up you need, you spend more time just trying to find things out. So if it takes you a couple weeks to do this and get your CRM corrected and fixed, I think you're going to have major dividends from that time spent as you begin to do prospecting, which you should do every single day. I'll just add that. Every day. All right. So that's article number 1, guys. Hope you find that helpful. Just those that are watching right now, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate that. Just know a conversation is coming up here at the very end of this about the FinCEN requirements and regulation changes, the FinCEN changes that really affect attorneys and title companies and closing agents. more than it does us as real estate agents, but it's something we need to be aware of. We need to be able to guide our clients correctly. All right, let's go ahead and jump into article number 2. This one I hear is by MSN. Well, yeah, it's story by Shana Mishkin, and it is titled, well, this is a lot of stuff. The new housing crisis isn't new. What it means if you're buying or selling. Now, I will say we are constantly hearing a ton of noise about the new housing crisis, and we're talking about affordability gaps, lock-in effects, all those type of things. So this article is going to break down why these inventory and affordability struggles and all that kind of stuff is not really new. It's actually decades kind of in the making. It's not something that's just sprung up on us and we weren't anticipating it. It's something that has been in the making and that economists have been talking about for a long time. I've been talking about it here for weeks and months. It's not new. We've been talking about this coming for a while. It's just what it is. It's less of a crash. It's not a crash. It's more of like a reset, or you could even probably use the word stagnation, because it's almost like there's like a hold pattern going on because you got a little bit of a gap in some of the demographics that needs to maybe push the housing market a little faster. So maybe I'll just call it that, more of a market stagnation. That's more about what we're seeing here. And so that's what this article is going to be talking about. And so let's go ahead and kind of get into this one. Like I said, this is by MSN. Sorry for the pop-ups and everything. This is just the way MSN does it. So when I talk about cutting through the noise of the news, you also have to cut through all the pop-up ads to get to the news that you then have to cut through. So extra good, MSN. Well done. All right, if we keep scrolling down, we'll get down to where there we go. All right. It says buyers and sellers should be aware of the dynamics at play, keyword, local housing markets. Now, I talk a lot about, the housing market at a national level. I'm using data. Obviously, I can't speak to everybody's local market that's on here. That would be impossible. I have people from all around the world. There's no way for me to do that. But in the United States, specifically, I can look at it broadly. We can give information broadly, but in the end, you have to take it locally. So you can take all the metrics and all the numbers and all the data that I talk about as a nationwide and take that same kind of information and take it to your local MLS or local way of gathering information and come to the conclusion about what's going on in your market, because real estate is highly local. It's highly local. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit deeper. All right. You might have heard that January home sales were abysmal and that a trade group's chief economist described the situation as a new housing crisis. So, new housing crisis. There's an element of truth to that. With a typically busy spring season around the corner, buyers and sellers wondering what this means for their plans shouldn't panic, but brushing up on local real estate trends wouldn't hurt. And this is something I would just encourage you guys to do. I know going through housing market data and looking at all this kind of stuff can be very boring and kind of annoying, right? It could be a constant issue. But the reality is, if you're a real estate agent, it is so important for us to just brush up and stay current. We are in an industry where it changes every single day. I mean, my goodness, I could go to Mortgage Daily News Mortgage News Daily, right? I can go to Mortgage News Daily. All right. I can go to this website here, Mortgage News Daily, and I can pull this up and I can immediately look at this rate right here. And you on TikTok, I'm sorry you cannot see that. I can't share my screen, but just yesterday, it showed the 30-year fixed rate low. It dropped, 0.01. Now it's plus 0.01. I mean, if you were to factor in the mortgage rate alone, it fluctuates almost every 3 to 4 days to some point degree. So we are in a market that is constantly changing, and we're in an industry that affects more people than any other industry. So it is very important for us as real estate agents to stay brushed up on this information. My goal here is to kind of bring that forward and just get us thinking and talking through this kind of stuff. All right. That's my soapbox for the day. Sorry. All right, let's get back to the article. Hope you guys got coffee. I've got a lot in me. So, all right, let's go. All right. Sales of previously owned homes dropped to a slower than expected annualized pace of 3.91 million in January. The National Association of Realtors said last week, the reading was a big disappointment. Lawrence Yun, chief economist of the National Association of Realtors, said Thursday. I don't know if you guys know Dr. Lawrence Yun or not. I've actually had him on this show. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable in the real estate economy. He's very careful with his words. And even right here, he's correct. He says big disappointment. I did an article that he shared not too long ago, and he was talking about he was hopeful. He was very hopeful. He did some projections, and he was thinking that we were going to go into January, February and see a little bit more of an uptick in especially like the new home built areas. And I think this is kind of piggybacking off of that, where he's saying it's a big disappointment. That would be my opinion of why he's saying that. It's a big disappointment because he had projected things to be a little bit better than what they were. But he's not afraid of being wrong. He understands when he makes a guess and when he relies on data. He's very good at doing that. I applaud him. I think he's done an amazing job. He's very good at his job. All right, the low number of sales was continuing off this new housing crisis, not the foreclosure housing crisis, but the housing crisis of where people are unable to get into the housing market, Yoon said. And that's true. We've got this weird lock-in effect still as a factor. Yet you have the millennial gaps. You go back to, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and during that era, inflation went crazy, right? And the demographic that got affected the most by that was the millennial generation. The baby boomers had the most cash. They had good jobs. They were pretty much set. They could refinance, get a lower rate, or they could sell and buy, and made a lot of money. The millennial generation was going to college, and especially generation, I think is it X after that and whatever, all the generations after that are now in the buyer's market are having a hard time because they got out of college, or they're going to college and they got out of college. They don't have the job security. They don't have the income to absorb the high inflation. So it's kind of a lost generation. So that's kind of the housing crisis that we see right here. All right, the report and commentary caused an unusual stir. Stocks fell in a move partially attributed to the reading, while hundreds of commenters discussed the news on social media. It says buyers and sellers should be aware of the dynamics at play in their local housing markets, but the recent data shouldn't change their plans. And that's true. Look, there's a lot of noise in the news. It doesn't mean you don't talk and you have conversations and try to work through how this correlates to you. Like, everybody's different. Don't go off the headline and make a decision off that. I know you agents out there are listening to me, but if there's a consumer, I want them to hear that too. Now, it's still a good time to buy if you can. It's much better than renting. What it means, the new housing crisis isn't all that new. And this is true. It's a continuation of the same sales slowdown that struck the market in 23, 24, and last year. Homeowners, Yoon said, have been able to build housing wealth over the past several years, while many buyers have remained locked out. There are people who are struggling to get into the market. So clearly a case of haves and have-nots, Yoon said. And that's what I just said. Like the ones that are kind of have-nots is going to be that generation I was mentioning before. It's that millennial generation and X and everything after. They could buy. If you go back, 7, 8 years ago, before the inflation, they could have bought homes with the income they had. But now inflation has taken off so much and the interest rate spiked and their income hasn't caught back up. They're kind of caught in this middle of this have-nots, right? I'll skip that. That's kind of the point I think he's making there. What it doesn't mean, don't expect dramatic drops in home prices or a wave of foreclosures. If anything, the risk to pricing is to the upside. And it's funny that we're sitting here talking about the market like this, and at the very next statement, it's like, don't expect dramatic drops in home prices or foreclosures, right? That's what makes this such a unique, and going back to what I said, more of like a stagnation. It's like there's nothing extreme going on. Like when you look at the data, there's really nothing crazy going on one way or the other. It's staying very, very chill. And it's a navigation of the interest rate versus the job growth and that kind of stuff that's causing this to kind of be more stagnant. And again, it's by design. It's kind of by a strategy. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to play out exactly in every single field correctly, but it is probably the right play given the volatility of the emotion of the consumer. I think this is a good play. Mortgage rates, one of the main levers of home buying costs, have moved down significantly since the year began. Mortgage News Daily on Friday pegged the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate at 6.04, which we go back to this now today, it's 6.05. Remember I just said it went up 0.01 or 0.01%, so now it's 6.05. Again, it just fluctuates so fast. And these are marginal changes, very little. Yeah. After January's softer than expected inflation data was released, down nearly a percentage point from the reading near 7% 1 year prior, let me just pause for just 1 second. And if you are a consumer, even if you're a real estate agent, notice this. If we go back just a couple years ago when the interest rate was 7%, did you guys still sell houses? Consumers, did you still buy and sell houses? The answer is yes. Did it slow down? Probably. But you did buy. And now you own a home. What could you do right now that would bring your interest rate down? Refinance, right? You could refinance a house. So again, when you start talking about interest rate as being the only factor that's just helping you to make a decision if you need to buy or not, it's not really the right game to be playing. The interest rate is a factor, but it's not the only factor. It's one number, but it's a controllable number, because if it does go down, then you can refinance and get a lower interest rate if you need to. The second category, though, is, and this is the more important one, is if you're in a market where inflation is still happening month over month, and right now we're sitting at a little over 2%, 2.7, I think is the last report I read. 2.7 month over month means every single month that goes by, you're gaining more in equity than the percentage of 7 versus 6. So the math doesn't add up. If you're waiting to buy, you could have bought at 7, gained a huge amount of equity, and be sitting on more equity than paying rent, right? So again, you need a home, you need someplace to live. So don't play the interest rate game. Don't play that game. That's not really the game to play. It's a factor. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like don't pay attention to interest rate. It's a factor, and it does go into the affordability of a home, but you need to think beyond just the rate. Absent any shocks to treasury yields or mortgage-backed securities, a rate near 6% could look enticing enough for buyers to re-enter the market this year. If the significant drop in mortgage rates in January improved the math for buyers considering a home purchase, it should show up in a gain in pending home sales, which is due for release later this month. And I'm going to skip on down. I read an article today too, just real quick. I was thought about sharing it, but I was like, I got too many articles. I'll be talking a long time. But it's really about the refinancing industry, and there's been a major uptick in refinances. The refinance applications have increased. So to answer the question that they just posed there about an uptick in buyer traffic, I say there will be a much bigger buyer traffic in the spring. You know, when you drop a whole percentage point and then it stays there for a few months, the consumer confidence level increases. So they're more likely to buy. And then you see that in refinancing as well. They're willing to pay the out-of-pocket expense to refinance to save the extra percentage, which means there's a consumer confidence that's entering into the market. And that's what you need to have happen. That's how you rebalance a market. But again, more of a stagnation, right? It says buyers and sellers. Yeah. So now we're going to the local job market. It says local job markets matter more than buyers and sellers might think. There are a few select markets where home sales are trending higher compared with last year, in particular where local economies are adding jobs or where domestic in-migration continues. Selma Hepp, the chief economist at real estate data and analytics company Cotality, said in a statement, quote, "But for the most part, many housing markets are stagnating," there's that word, "with labor markets not adding jobs and families not relocating." Now, I'm just going to skip on down and just wrap this article up because, and the reason why I want to is we can get into more and more data, but the reality is, we've got more of not a crisis, more of a stagnation. But what we need to be paying attention to, more importantly, is when we read articles like this that is based on a national perspective, we pay attention, we listen and we dissect this, and we then use this information and we take it to the local level. You know, this does not necessarily correlate to the area that you work in or live in. You could be in an area where there are major businesses moving in. You got major in-migration taking place. You know, you got more people moving from bigger cities into your more rural areas. You know, there's a lot of factors at play. You could have deregulation taking place in your cities where the mayor is more proactive in deregulating zoning laws to spur along more building activity, right? So there's a lot of things at work here that you could read this and just chalk it up and say that's what it is, but you really take information like this and you take it down to the local level. That's what you do with this. So take what I'm saying here and take it all down to your local information. Like go to your MLS and start pulling information. Now, what I would do, and here's some action items for you guys if you want to take my observations and apply these, great. You know, I would educate. I would create in your local market some sheet, some form, some flyer to educate clients on the cost of waiting. Because we're at a 1% drop than it was last year. I would show and have a graph, do a social media post or something showing the difference in the payment. Like go into your MLS right now and find what the average selling price is of the home. Do the breakdown about what that payment would be using a mortgage calculator, and come up with a scenario if the interest rate was 7 versus 6, right? And where does that land? And find out what the difference in that payment is. And it'll be eye-opening to a lot of your consumers. And that will be a great social media post to provide value back. But it requires your local information. Like you got to get your local data. That's where you're going to lean into that, right? I would also, I would probably reach out to at least some of your local builders, talk to them and find out what they're thinking about building and what they're looking at doing. You know, a lot of these areas, even though like overall the building industry has slowed, going back where everything's local, if you're in an area where building is ramping up and new developments are happening, it is important. If you don't have the listing, another agent has the listing, go talk to that listing agent. If the builders work with multiple agents, go talk to the builder and ask them about things that they're doing. What kind of incentives do they offer buyers if they buy their homes? Do they offer buy downs? Do they do closing cost assistance and other things, right? Have a conversation with them, because you might have a buyer pool inside of your brokerage or you as an agent that could benefit from knowing what the options are out there to get more buyers into your market. So I would definitely lean into that, even though I know overall building is slowing down just because of the cost and the gap, but the affordability gap. But I do know a lot of builders are doing some really creative things to get people to buy their homes. So I would definitely do that. The final thing I would say, going back to what I was talking about, this generational gap, even though I would love to be able to help more and more of the millennial and that generation after that, there's a difficulty there because of the income and affordability of the home gap. So it's a harder market to kind of niche down into. What I would encourage you to do is focus marketing more towards, you know, the high equity owners who can buy their next home or have major life changes. And that typically is like your empty nesters. You know, if they got kids going off to college or graduated or getting married, they may have a bigger house. Yes, they may have a lower interest rate on their house, but the scenario could be where they have so much equity and they need a smaller house that they can roll over and buy a house without having any debt at all. That's a scenario in a lot of cases. Or they could reduce their expenses. And this is where that understanding, you know, the finances of a home and the cost overall of running a home, you got to understand most consumers are not thinking about things as a broad perspective. You know, if I was a consumer and I lived in a house and I saw headlines like this talking about interest rates and all this kind of stuff, I could read that and not necessarily correlate that into the total cost of owning that particular house. As a real estate agent, when I start really thinking about how I can offer the most value to my consumers, I'm going to take all the information about the home, the cost of heating and cooling it, the cost of water, the property taxes, the insurance on that large of a home. All of those things are factors outside of just being locked into a low interest rate. Because let's just say, like if they were to have a 6% interest rate and they right now have a 3, but they reduce their outgo, it's a better option because they can take that reduction in their outgo and put more towards the equity. Maybe even just doing a 15-year mortgage loan instead of a 30 and pay off their home a lot quicker. This is where you got to get into the math of your client. And again, this is something that AI cannot do. This is the value that you give as an agent, right? Keep that all in mind. So anyway, that's my thought process as far as guiding people through that kind of stuff. So hopefully that's helpful, guys. Now we're going to go down to the topic, the big one that everyone, to be honest, my own agents are asking me about. Because this deadline is coming, and I will say it's not been talked about the most inside of real estate and our brokerages as much, mainly because it doesn't affect us directly, but it is something we need to be very much aware of because we need to know how to guide our clients in regards to that. And what I am talking about is the FinCEN, FINCEN, okay, regulation. And let me see something real quick before I get into this. I think there's actually a website for this that I can give you guys. Yeah, if you want any more information, I'll break this down for you guys, and we'll talk about an article that I pulled talking about this. I'll elaborate on what this means. But here is basically what it is. federal regulations are tightening. FinCEN has finalized a new reporting requirements for residential real estate to combat money laundering. So if you or your clients use LLCs, companies, S corps, whatever, to buy property, you need to pay attention to these BOIs, beneficial ownership information rules. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. All right. But this is a website that you can go to. Before I get into the article and dissecting what FinCEN is, this is where you can go. You can go to fincen.gov, FINCEN.gov, right? Inside of here, you're going to find all the information you need to get equipped. Now, given this is a lot of governmental and regulation, jargon and that kind of stuff, so sometimes you just need to take your time and read through this. You can research this, but you can talk through this and what all this is. If you're a broker out there, I encourage you to have a meeting with your agents, talk through this. I'll be doing likewise with my agents. But it's very important for us to pay attention to this because we do need to know how to guide our clients before they go to closing and certain things that title companies and stuff are going to need to be able to process and get to closing. Now, let's get into the actual article here, right? This right here is by jdsupra.com. Okay, that's the website we're in, JD Supra. I found this article just because it's a simple way of kind of dissecting what this is. All right, the title is FinCEN finalizes new residential real estate reporting rule, and it's effective March 1st, 2026. All right, beginning March 1st of 2026, a new residential real estate rule from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is FinCEN, will require federal reporting of certain residential real estate transactions. And now the key word here is certain, okay? We need to hone in a little bit there. There are certain criteria that this would fall under. This does not mean all residential, right? It says the rule expands anti-money laundering oversight to the residential real estate market and is intended to increase transparency into acquisitions of entity-owned property, okay? It says transactions involving mortgage financing from regulated financial institutions are generally excluded, as are transfers directly to individuals. Okay, so like me to another person. And if the loan is being handled by a regulated financial institution like a bank or a mortgage lender, right? If it's being handled by that, this is not required. If it's individual to individual, it's not required. All right. Now it goes on. The rule applies to non-financed, typically all cash transfers of U.S. residential real property where the purchaser is a legal entity or trust. Okay, so if you have an S corp, an LLC, or something that owns that property, or if it's in a trust or wanting to be put into a trust, it would fall under needing to have these requirements met. Okay, so that's the criteria here. So what do we have? We know that it's not every single residential property. We know that it is only those that are being under an entity owned. In other words, going to an LLC or a trust. If it involves a regulated financial institution, it's not required. That is excluded. And if myself sell to somebody else, it's a cash deal, it's excluded. For the most part, it's non-finance transactions, residential in base, all cash. Typically, okay? There is the umbrella of what is required. All right, it says covered properties include 1 to 4 family homes, so single to 4 units. That's a multi-complex. Condominiums, cooperatives, and certain unimproved land intended for residential use. All right, unlike the Corporate Transparency Act, which places reporting obligations on entities themselves, the real estate rule assigns reporting responsibility to professionals involved in what? The closing process. Okay, so this is where it's like a lot of my agents are like, what do we have to do? All right, the reporting responsibility to professionals involved in the closing process. And it goes on to say, settlement agent, title agent, escrow agent, or attorney handling the transaction. Okay, the requirement, the process is handled by them. It's not your job to do it. Only one report is required per transfer. and parties may allocate responsibility by written agreement. The report is filed electronically with FinCEN after the closing, and must include information about the property, the seller, the purchaser, and beneficial ownership information for the purchasing entity or trust. Really what we're getting down to here, and when I wrap up this article, I'll give you the things that are on that FinCEN report and tell you kind of this is what they're looking for. That's where I think the real estate agent can help speed processes along by being upfront and communicating this to their clients. But what's happening here is there's a lot of laundering going on where buyers can come in with shell corporations and buy property. A lot of times just money laundering, moving money around. So what's happening is this government agency is wanting to crack down to protect consumers from this type of laundering. So the people that we're dealing with on the other side of the deal are real people that are wanting to buy the property for residential use, not to launder money through. So it's cracking down. This is crazy that this is even a thing, but this is happening a lot to the point where this has now become a must, right? All right, trust and trust-related transfers warrant particular attention under the rule. Transfers of residential real property to revocable trusts and irrevocable trusts may be reportable if the transfer is non-financed and no exemption applies. In these cases, FinCEN requires reporting identifying information for the trust, as well as information about individuals who exercise control over or have significant beneficial interests in the trust. As a result, clients using trusts or for estate planning, asset management, or privacy purposes should expect additional information requests and potential timing considerations at closing. There's a lot of pushback a little bit on this because there are a lot of people that want to stay autonomous. They don't want people to know, anonymous, I'm sorry. They want to be anonymous to the transaction. They don't want people to know who they are when they're buying a property. This kind of causes a little bit of tension there. We'll see how this plays out, if there's any room for that still to be the case. We don't know exactly how that will look. But the reality is, I have a feeling it's going to be really, really hard for buyers to stay anonymous. There are so much fraud and so much laundering going on that it's almost crucial that the person buying has to be disclosed. I think that's where it's leading. So there's going to be point of tension there. I do think so. And when you start talking about celebrities or people that are big investors that don't want people to know that they own certain land or their entities buy it for good reasons, right? There's the logical reason why they do that. I think there's gonna be a problem here. I think it's gonna be really hard for them to continue to do so. All right. It says the rule contains limited exemptions, including transfers occurring by reason of death, divorce, court order, bankruptcy proceedings, and certain Section 1031 exchange transactions. These exemptions are narrowly defined and must be evaluated carefully. So there's some scrutiny there that can still take place, right? All right, it says, although the rule does not take effect until March 1st, 2026, buyers using entities or trusts and the professionals advising them, look, here's the thing. I understand it's not our obligation to make sure that they do what they need to do. That is on the attorney, closing agents, title companies, all of them, right? But I am of the mind that a true professional is going to help their client through the whole process, and they're going to communicate everything along the way. So there's no unforeseen circumstances that pop up. So as agents, I would put us into the category of the professionals advising them. Not that we're responsible, but I think there's an important factor on why we should let them and help them be aware, right? We owe it to them so that when they go to closing, they know that even though they own this entity, there is certain information that they're going to be required to disclose. It's going to make the transaction a whole lot smoother, guys. The new requirements will affect transaction timelines, closing documentation, information gathering practices, particularly in all cash and privately financed transactions. There you go. That summarizes it all up, right? So there you go. It's going to affect not legal entities, LLCs, trusts, and those type of things. They now face a stricter way of transparency requirements. The goal right here is basically to identify the beneficial owner of the transaction. In other words, the human behind the entity. Okay, that's the aim of this. So if I was to summarize why we have this, that's why, right? Who is the actual human being behind the entity that is buying this property with all cash? Are they just moving money, or is there a real person? So there is, for specific criteria that they need. All right. Let me just tell you some of the information. So if you guys wanted to figure out a way when you're meeting with clients that are all cash buyers that are buying through a company or a trust, here's some of the things that they will need from the individual. Okay. They're going to need their full legal name. And that's the individual, the owner of that company, or the beneficiary of the trust, or the executor of that trust. They need the date of birth of that individual. They need the current residential street address of that person. They also need identification documents, a non-expired document, such as, driver's license, state, local, issued ID, passport, whatever it may be. They need like an ID number, jurisdiction number, the unique number from a document in regards to what state and jurisdiction they live in, what identifies that entity, typically like EIN number or your local state filing number, those type of things. They will need document image. They need a scan or documents of the ID and all that active in there. Then they would take all that information and they would submit that through an agreement with FinCEN ID. Okay. Now, I will say those that do not, the title companies and others that do not disclose this information and provide this, there are significant civil and criminal penalties for not doing so. It can be pretty hefty. So if you're an attorney out there, title company, you guys are definitely getting trained on this, but be warned, it could get pretty messy. It can get pretty messy. All right. So what would I say from this, right? Why not create some kind of verbiage inside of your buyer presentations and listing presentations talking about what this is, inserting a slide in there about FinCEN, and just simply stating, hey, if you plan on buying under an entity or through a trust, here are some of the key information that you're going to have to provide to the closing attorney, title company, bank, or not usually bank, but title company if you're buying all cash, right? So maybe even on your intake form, maybe just simply have a spot that just asks the question, do you intend to purchase via an LLC or legal entity of some sort or a trust? Yes or no? If they check yes on that intake form or the answer yes, you need to have that conversation with them to set them up to get them ready before closing. What I would do also is I would go and talk to a local title company attorney, set up a call with them, a meeting with them, walk them through, ask them the questions I've just posed here, see if what I'm saying is true, match it up with those that actually truly know, and navigate that correctly. So make sure you know what you're telling your clients is correct. Okay. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a closing agent. I'm reading an article. I'm reading about what I hear. Take it to those that do know. Okay. All right. Let's see I've got a couple more. So ensure the transaction coordinator knows which IDs. So if you're working with a transaction coordinator, you need to make sure that transaction coordinator is aware of this too, and have them put into their system, if they have an intake form that you fill out to submit that asks that same question, is this client using an LLC entity or trust? Have that conversation with them. And then pass it on to the TC, the transaction coordinator, and have them have some kind of system in place to get that information, or at least have the conversation with the client. That would be good. I think that's very important. I would also, if you are currently working with any investors that are buying under an entity, you need to have a conversation with them and get them aware of this. So maybe you need to reach out to your investors that are buying off of that, or estate planners or anything like that. Okay. So I would definitely be doing that. Now, that's it for the day. Now, what I do want to do is just real quick, just as I came across this, but I wanted to mention this. This whole week, I've been talking about Mortgage News Daily and how much I use that for interest rates and that kind of stuff. I'm just going to throw this out there to you guys. This is not me. I'm not an affiliate of anything, guys. I don't do that. So this is Mortgage News Daily. And they have a lot of information just strictly about the mortgage industry. And I like it because I can quickly get information about interest rates. I can see the 30-year, 15-year, the jumbo, the ARMs, and then the FHA and VA rates. I can quickly get that information. Plus, they have a lot of helpful articles here. The next thing I would say is they also have a very good app. Okay, so if you look at the app there, I'll put this on all the screens. This is the app. Let's see if you can see that. Can you see that? Yeah. This is the app, and you can see that it shows the interest rate. It shows you exactly what's on my screen. It shows you what their interest rates currently are. So that's what you're seeing there. So the next thing it does is you have your calculator and stuff right there. So you have all that built in as well. So it's all nice, tight, needy, and very simple to use. So I would just say that's a great app if you're looking for a way to kind of find out what the interest rate is currently, and also what, news is going on, and have a calculator for mortgage calculations really quick on hand. Now, I will say this, one little caveat though, is don't just say that this is the mortgage rate, because there's so many different scenarios for buyers. They really need to get in front of a lender and talk to them about their rate. It could be different, but you can at least use this as a baseline for conversational purposes, or at least to figure out some math if you need to put some math on a contract. So just lean into that. Hopefully that's helpful. Guys, thank you so much. That is your real estate brief for today. If you found this helpful, please consider hitting the like button to tell YouTube you would like more of this type of content. Also consider following me on TikTok. Appreciate that as well. And consider subscribing to join a community of real estate agents that are focused on building a business that is relationship focused first. And that is it. That's all I got for today. And that's all I got for this week. So I will not be live streaming again until next Monday morning, 8:30 Eastern time, right here where you're watching me right now. I will be back. We'll talk about some of the other stuff that's happened over the weekend. Come bring some questions. Let's have a good discussion. Have a great weekend. And I will see you next time right here where you're watching it. Take care.